Sarah, are you Sarah Murphy?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, just wanted to check. Had the right one. Hello, Stephanie.
Hello.
We're going to wait a minute or two and then we will jump into it. Just give me a minute. We have a lot of agents are still on realtor time. So let's just see if anybody else pops in. If not, we'll get ready to go. Okay, let me get to the point I'm going to share here. Hang on just a minute. Sarah, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okie dokie. Sarah, can you see it?
Yep.
Okie dokie. All righty. We'll let anybody else jump in as we go along. We're going to do buy-sell contracts today.
Okay.
Now, Sarah, I understand you've written a couple of them lately.
No, Ryan has, and I've just sat back and watched, but I wanted to see how you did it.
Okay. Well, hopefully he adds a little more than I do.
Okay.
But since you work for him, it would be best if you do in the way he wants to have them done.
Okay.
But if you point out something that you think should be changed, be sure to point it out to him.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to give you is a list of documents that you have to have. Okay. So the first grouping is when you talk to a buyer, you have brokerage disclosure to buyer, or you can have definitions of working relationship. Either way is fine. And we have buyer agency agreement, buyer advisory. If you're changing from a buyer's agent to a transaction broker, hang on just a second. You have to do a document called change of status. So again, if you go from a transaction broker to, there he is, from a buyer's agent to a transaction broker, you have to use a document called change of status. That doesn't happen very often, to be honest with you. It's probably pretty rare. It'll happen more, if it's going to happen, it'll happen on the listing side more than anything. Once you get under contract, you need a lender letter, the printout from the MLS printout sheet that says it's under contract, a realist information on the seller, a counter proposal if you have one, copy of the earnest money check and receipt, your inspection objection and resolution. Do not give me the file until you've gone through your inspection objection and resolution. There are a handful of under contracts that fall out because of the inspection. Seller's property disclosure, square foot disclosure, and source of water and closing you may or may not get from the other agent. Most of these, you get about 50% that are too lazy to put these together.
Okay.
Any and all amend extends, lead-based paint if it applies. If you're doing a post-closing occupancy agreement, you want to do that at the time of offer. Earnest promissory note is rarely used. It could be, it's only if it's needed. Commission agreement for sale by owners or new constructions are in. There is a document in CTME or DocuSign that has, it says commission. Normally the new construction has their own document, but for sale by owners don't, so you haven't signed that. Short sale addendums, you don't need them currently, but you might in the future depending on how our market goes. Then once you've uploaded all your documents, then you go to commission request and fill out that document so you get paid at closing. Once you go to closing and get your closing docs, you upload your information from the title company, copy of checks and or distribution sheet, and the sold MLS. And any other documents that you have for this deal, you can put it at the bottom of the document under contract. So it doesn't have anything there that it's a receipt and just a good place to keep them. Definitions of working relationship, or even the brokerage relationship. Either one is, this is what it looks like, this is how it's filled out. Buyer agency agreement, you start with the box at the top. Always want to check that box, and then you put your date in. You always check the 2.1 multi-person office. You want to be sure on number 3, you put the buyer's legal name. That way you don't have to worry about it. When you go to write your offer, it's auto-populated. The Keller Williams Real Estate LLC, and your name should be in there when you set up your accounts in either DocuSign or CTME. You go ahead and put in, oh, we have another person, so hang on just a second here. All righty here. So on number 3, you always want to put this in your buyer agency agreement. On number 4, this covers all how you can get paid. Buyer's next principal residence, whether from the MLS, multi-listing service, a FSBO for sale by owner, property, investment property, or a new home. You could also, you could add land if you want in here too. That would be fine. Then 3.6 is your beginning and ending date. I would put that you put at least 6-7 months, maybe a little longer, based on the price point that your buyers are buying. You don't want to have to go back and readjust this if they're out of the contract. So I think 6 is the minimum. And if you could get 9, that would be the best thing, based on the fact that we know that it takes a long time to get certain price points in under contract, although these price points are changing and more listings are coming on the market every day. 3.8.2 is the holiday. Will it go to the next day if it falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or a federal holiday or state holiday? It's up to you, however you want to do it. Number 4, your brokerage relationship. You're only going to be a buyer's agent.
Bless you.
My allergies are killing me here. Buyer broker only. Check that box. Once you set, this is your agency agreement. I mean, these are your duties. You want to become familiar with them. You don't have to memorize them, but you want to become familiar with them. Number 6, when you check the box at the top, these are your 3 additional duties: promoting the interest of the buyers to gain price and terms that are acceptable to the buyer, counseling with the buyer on material benefits and risk of the transaction. If you're going to get fired, this would be this is the place you're going to get fired on, okay? Now you go down here, your success fee on 711 is your success fee. You want to get paid 2.8. If for some reason there's an advertise at 2.5 or 2 or whatever, I've never gone back to my buyer and asked for the difference, but if you want, you could. Then you want to check this box, other, and then it's any bonus or greater commission shall be paid to Keller Williams Real Estate LLC at the time of closing. This is if you go to a builder and they're offering 3% or 4% or some kind of bonus, you'll be able to get that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to technically get it. It just cuts off a lot of anxiety for you. No other compensation at this time. 7.2.4 is, I always put something in there about the lease just in case somebody's going to lease anything. I've never exercised it, but it makes everybody understand I will get it if you were choosing to go lease. Somebody may owe me a commission. Then you want to check the box 7.3.1, the listing brokerage firm. Buyer is obligated to pay if the seller doesn't. This is usually goes right through. Every once in a while, you'll have somebody that's not going to agree to that. They'll go down here and check the buyer is not obligated. Whatever works between you and your buyer is fine. This is the holdover clause on 7.4. Is you can put anywhere from 30 to 60 to 90 days, 120, whatever you want. If there's a list of houses in it, your agreement goes south, and you want to be sure that you are covered if they go back and make an offer on a house that you already know you've shown that to them. So now on number 9, it says that the buyer is not obligated to any other broker and has not received a list submitted to a previous listing that they could be excluded, you could be excluded from. So we now go down to 12. It's how you get the show the properties. Is there any additional tasks for the broker to do? No, none at this time. How do you show as per the MLS instructions and the MLS that you're going to show them? So you could say the Denver metro area and Colorado Springs and Fort Collins. So those are different MLS systems. So you want to be specific where you're showing. We had a buyer years ago who wanted southern by Castle Rock, and he wanted to go to Colorado Springs. I couldn't show Colorado Springs. I'm not familiar with that. And so he had an agent down there and he had me up here. He kept begging me to go to Colorado Springs. And I said, I can't, I am not familiar with it. So anyway, you can do that in an agreement as long as all parties understand there are 2 agreements. Then you disclose your identity. Yes, you will. If there's a third party, the buyer has permission to disclose the buyer's identity. If that's the case, sometimes you have people. My husband and I worked with actors and athletes and things like that. They don't want their name out on a contract or disclosed as they're going through seeing properties, and so we don't disclose. So most people will be, that's fine, but every once in a while it's not. A doctor, lawyer, whatever. So you need to read 14 through 20 are pretty self-explanatory. You want to read them and understand those pretty well. Then 21, I usually don't have any additional provisions. What I might put in here is my transaction coordinator's name, number, email address, and who's going to pay for it. Or it might be charged to the buyer. So you want to be sure to put that in there and who's paying for it. Here are the attachments to this document. Buyer's advisory and definition of working relationship will go with this agreement. So 23 all the way down to 28 are pretty self-explanatory. Buyer sign, you sign, everybody goes forth. This is the buyer advisory that is prepared by our in-house attorney. Please go over it with your buyers carefully so that they do understand earnest money, wire fraud disclosures, inspections, septic, tax matters, surveys, insurance, HOA docs, all those types of things. Make sure they understand it and everybody signs and moves on. Then here's your buy-sell contract. You have your legal names of your buyers. You need to ask them they're taking it in joint tenants, tenants in common, or other. Joint tenants is the right of survivorship. Tenants in common are usually as a percentage, and other is usually a single person subtlety. The seller's legal names you get off of the realist from MLS. Now you know what county it's in, the legal description, and the address. So you check all that. So now what's staying? I've got 3 garage door openers. Be specific. Don't use the word all in here. Make sure you put down a number. Now also at the bottom of your writing of a contract like this, the very last below the agent signatures, you could delete NAs out of this contract. So don't put any NAs in this contract. It deletes the paragraph. So you don't want any NAs in here at all. You always want to use the word none or leave it blank. So here you have a solar panel that is going to stay on the property. You also other inclusions, freestanding gas stove, GE refrigerator located in the kitchen, the ice maker is in the bar refrigerator, whatever. Be specific. The more specific you are, the less likely is somebody is going to walk out the door with that. This checkbox right here is usually used in the high country and not down here, okay? Is there any encumbrance? Was there something for the solar or anything of that nature? Is there going to be any liens against the property? You want to put the word none here. Be specific, nothing. You want no liens against the house. On 2.5.6, I know there's a 3-car garage attached to this house. I understand there's 1, 2, 3, whatever the garages are. But if you're so used to skipping paragraph 2.5.6, if you come to a condo or a townhome and you want to be sure to ask the question, is there a reserved parking space? Is there storage in, units? Is it a closet out off the balcony? Is it in the underground parking space? This triggers those questions, so don't be sure to fill them out appropriately. On 2.5.7, it tells you there's a lease on the solar that are currently installed on the property. Exclusion is the washer and dryer in the upstairs laundry room. So now, do you have any water rights? Most of the time, these questions are no, but you want to be sure that you understand if you're selling acreage, it has either a well or a septic on it. What is that situation? So you want to be sure to understand if you have a well, you will be putting in your well permit number down where, okay, not stock. Let me see where the well permit number is. Oh, right here. So you can put your water. You want to know, you might have rights, but normally you don't. And then you usually put your well permit right here. Okay. And you can get that from the seller, or it should be in your MLS printout sheet what the well permit number is if there is one and you need to put it in there. Okay. So then you want to be sure that you are asking if there's a well permit. Usually in a city or subdivision, there isn't, but if you're selling land, acreage, there could be. So get the well permit. Usually water is not going to convey. It might, it'll say that in the MLS. So be sure to put the word none here. And then on 2.7.6, you do or don't want to have the right to review, terminate or review the water rights. Most of the time this is going to be does not. Every once in a while it will be does, depending on if you're doing acreage. So next week we will do dates and deadlines. So I'm not going to get to those. We'll do that next week. Here's your NAs. Don't delete and leave these and leave blanks, or don't put any NAs in your contract, guys. Now, deadlines will or will not be extended to the next day on Saturday, Sunday, or holidays. You want to be sure if that's something important to you, you check the appropriate box. Number 4 is what are we offering? What's the earnest money? You'll see that in the MLS. What kind of loan they're getting, that you get from the what kind of loan they're getting, period. And you can talk to the lender, will give you a letter. Don't get a lender letter in any more than what the buyer wants to offer. So if they're qualified for 600 and you are only offering 450 and you send over a lender letter that says 6, then the buyer is going to, the seller is going to automatically up this buyer up to a higher number, and we don't want that. Cash at closing, are they putting 3%, 5%, 10%, 20%, or more down? Be sure you put that at cash at closing. Cash at closing does not include closing costs, just so you know. Your column 1 and column 2 have to add up to whatever you're offering here. And on 4.2 is your seller concession. Be sure to put a 0 in there so they know you're not asking for anything. Or if you're asking for $2,000 because that's what the MLS said, then put it in there. Your earnest money can be in the form of a personal check and who it's going to be made out to. So 431 and all the way down to 4322. Pretty self-explanatory as to what happens if there's earnest money release. It has to be timely delivered, and etc. 4, in what form do you have this? Availability for loans. So yes, I do. When you say yes, that means I'm getting a loan and I have the down payment in the bank. If you say does not, that means I have a house that's under contract but hasn't closed yet. That's where you do does not. Please
Okay.
check the wrong box. It could be loan fraud. So careful how you check it. If you have a question, don't hesitate to call me on that. And then what kind of loan are you getting? 4.5.3, I'm getting what kind of loan? I'm going to do a conventional or an FHA or VA. Most of the time, bond and other are not used, but every once in a while could be. Only pick one of these. Make sure you already have talked to the lender or you know what kind of loan the buyer is going to get. If he can qualify for conventional FHA, I'd start with conventional because that's more acceptable to sellers. Doesn't mean that FHA can't be. You just have to be careful that you choose the right document, right loan. The buyers choose the right loan for them. When you start in doing your contract, you can take out assumption and seller financing, and you can go ahead and there's a little asterisk next to 4.6, 4.7. If you click on that, it'll shrink those two and you have a little less amount of paperwork in your offer. So number 5 is you're getting your new loan application done. That means I've given the lender the legal address and a legal description of the property, usually the next day after your offer has been accepted, and you've made your proper application. New term loan condition is I have a term that is the terms and conditions that we have presented to the buyer, Mr. Lender has, and they're acceptable to them. Once it is a 3 to 7 day process and your dates and deadlines, depending on which side of the coin you are. I'll explain that next week. But if you let this gate pass, normally you're not going to get your earnest money back. So be very careful and make sure that whatever it is that the buyer is acceptable, lock it in because the interest rates are going up daily. Then on 5.2.2, the availability of whatever they've agreed to is available. If it's available and they don't go through with it, they probably will lose their earnest money. This is very, very controversial, these two deadlines. So be cautious when you use them. Make sure you understand why you're using them. Now, 5.3 and 5.4 don't really we don't use a lot. It's a rare thing, okay? Number 6, the first portion of number 6 on the appraisal is for conventional. 6.2.2 is FHA. If you are going to use an FHA, whatever is in paragraph 4, that number will go where the 0 is. And you need to put it in because the FHA appraisers look for it in this paragraph. On a VA and FHA loan, you put dates in the contract, but they may or may not be met depending on how far out the FHA appraiser is or the VA appraiser. Every Monday, the VA gives out the documentation for saying, okay, I'll give out, they usually give out 10 a week. And if you're not that first 10, you'll be pushed to the following week. We don't know for sure. The reason I have you put dates in there is just to keep the lender honest and keep them on their toes. We do the best we can with it, and that's all we can do. 6.4 is who's going to pay for that appraisal. Normally it is the buyer. 7 is dealing with if this property is located in an HOA. These are all the documents that the seller has to give to the buyer by a certain date. So these are all these things in paragraph 7 have to be given to the buyer. If you're listing a property, your best bet is to pay the title company $150 to get them for the buyer so you don't miss out in any of the correct documentations. This is if you're listing. If you're a buyer, that's what you make sure you get what you are supposed to get for them. Now we're going to buy a number 8. Usually you check 8.1.1, seller selects and seller pays. There are 2 types of insurance policies in a loan. One's for the seller, one's for the buyer. And the buyer gets, the one he gets is for the lender. So if you check the box buyer selects and their buyer pays, they will pay for both of these documents, which increases the bottom line to a seller somewhere around anywhere from $1,800 to $2,200. So I understand why people do it. I just understand to convey to your buyer, it costs them more, about $2,200 more. Always check 8.1.3. Always put will. It's only $35. It is absolutely imperative that you do this. The reason is then the title company checks the day before, the day of, and the day after for any liens that might have been put on this property. It protects all parties on here unless somebody's trying. If nobody wants to pay for it, you pay for it because it's imperative that you do it. I always check seller if I represent the buyer. Some of the agents are checking buyer will pay for that. It's wanting to get the deal. Everything in 8 is pretty self-explanatory. Off-record matters, special taxing district. Tax certificates are, well, it's $25 to get. Will be paid by buyer or seller, whichever you choose is fine. Just understand it needs to come with the title company work. All of 8 is still dealing with the title company objections and all those things. You have oil leases and that type of thing is still under 8. If there's a gas lease or anything of that nature. Then on 8.9, mineral review. Normally the answer is does not. However, if you've got a piece of land and they're conveying the mineral rights, then you do does, but it takes somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks, maybe longer, to review mineral rights and water rights by those specific attorneys. So make sure you have a name of a water right attorney and a mineral right attorney if you're going to do land. And that way you will find out exactly how long it would take to review any documents. Number 9 is dealing with surveys. Most places you always want to check improvement location certificate. If it's acreage, you want to check survey and then put new ILC here, or you can put new survey. Then who's going to pay for it? That's negotiable. And who's doing for the new survey? Who's the cost of that is being paid by who? And who gets it? Never you. It's called buyer's lender gets it. Okay. The rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. And we go to number 10. Number 10 is basically you can have any kind of inspection you want as long as you don't destroy the property. So you just want to be sure that number 10, don't reiterate the property is being sold as is. That's exactly what it is. It's going with the as is, where is, and with all its faults. You don't have to reiterate this paragraph. It's already in here, which some agents do. Then you go down to due diligence. Due diligence only if there's something in here that the buyer needs. That would be your lease on the solar has another 15 years. The buyer will assume that or will not assume it, whatever the case may be. Most buyers are not going to want to assume a lease on a solar. Some will, some won't. So just be sure to ask, what your buyer would like to do. And if you're going to have encumbrances, will not assume the debt, will assume the debt, buyer will assume the debt or will not assume the debt on this lease, depending on how much it is and how much longer it has to go. Are there any other documents? Well, this is where you could put down, this would be where you have permits pulled for the finished basement or something of that nature. Normally, there's nothing else that goes in here. Nothing about the material on the new refrigerator or stove or washer, dryer, whatever staying. You don't put it in there, you put it in additional provisions. Source of water, does not acknowledge the receipt of one, but they're going to get, hopefully the seller will fill it out. Water source you may or may not get because many lazy agents don't want to do another one on top of the seller's property disclosure. And there's no well on this property. So number 10, you have lead-based paint, you're entitled to that inspection as long as you don't put as long as you put the house back to its original condition. You have to have carbon monoxide detectors within 15 feet of all the sleeping rooms. I suggest if you're on the listing site, get this done prior to putting it on the market. We don't have a meth lab disclosure. However, if you think there's been a meth, you could have it tested for meth if you need to have that done. Estoppels are dealing with statements that are done with rentals, and this does not have a rental. So now closing instructions, they are not executed with the contract, but the closing itself is always designated by the listing agent on 12/3. So now you're going to have a transfer of title. It's always special warranty deed, and you always check that box. It's not going to be a general warranty deed. It's not bargain and sale is only for water. Quit claim is to change names. Personal representative would be if it's an estate sale. Basically, the only thing you're going to use generally is going to be the special warranty deed, period. Now we go down to 15. These are dealing with other fees that would be split. A lot of agents are saying buyer will do it. Some are saying 50-50. Some are saying seller. I don't care how you do it. You consult with your sellers or your buyers of what you'd like. Status letters, be careful. Status letters are very expensive. I had one of the agents just get a status letter. It's $1,000. So be careful about the status letter because it can get very costly. You can do 50-50 or seller or buyer, whichever fees, but again, it increases the buyer's fees. Recordings, again, who's paying for that? Assessments and working capital, that's a switch in, it's in and out. Is it going to be buyers or is it going to be sellers? That's up to you guys. Other fees could be listed closing at the time, could be listed by seller or buyer. You have local transfer fees, seller. Normally in the down here we don't, so you could put NA or you can check seller or buyer is going to say yes, I'll pay for it. Same with seller sales and usage tax. That could be seller or down here we don't have any, so you can put NAs on both of these, on these two paragraphs, 15.4 and 15.5. Transfer fees, another one, we don't have them down here, but we do have them in the high country. So 15.6 can be another NA. Now you always put something in 17 dealing with water transfers. Please say you don't assume that there won't be, because there probably will be. If you're working with the spot over here, in Highlands Ranch, we have community water and not a water district, okay? Is it gonna be seller or half and half, or either? If you've got a well, then the answer is no, NA. The utility transfer fee is the same way. Just because I don't know if there's gonna be one, but who's going to pay for it if there is one? And get all this decided up front. FERPA is the Foreign National Act, which means the seller is a foreign national, and there'll be certain taxes that have to be paid at closing. If the foreign national doesn't pay it, the seller buyer will end up paying for it. So be cautious that they collect that at closing if you realize the seller is a foreign national. Same with the closing. If you have a property that you've lived in 6 months out of a year, there will be some 2% fees charged here at closing, and the seller can go back and file, when he files his taxes, get some of that back. Proration, we want to do our taxes. I usually check most recent mill levy and most recent assessment value. You want to be, we don't have rentals in here, so it doesn't really pertain. Other prorations, water, sewer, and the word none down here. Everything's final. Is there any association assessments? If it's a special assessment, like my HOA is about ready to give everybody a $5,800 to $6,000 assessment because of a hail damage that occurred in September 3rd in 2021. So if you know about it, you have to say, and you have to explain it, what it is and how much. And then down here, because you represent the buyer, you don't want anything else. So after the word and is the word none. On 17, if the seller does not vacate the premises on time, how much are you going to charge them? $100 is not making it very painful for them to leave on time. Make sure you make it painful. So $500 is a good number. If you have a post-closing occupancy, you check that box and you prepare a post-closing occupancy at the time of offer. Because if you do it later, now it becomes a point of argument and it may not get through. So 18 through basically all the way down to 20. This is our self, they're informational more than anything else. You get to verify a walkthrough. You can have a home warranty, Mr. Buyer. Down here, don't check specific performance. That means they'll sue for more than the earnest money. You don't want that to happen. So all the way down, keep going from 20 all the way through 26 are pretty self-explanatory. They're just be familiar with them and know what they are. 29, now we have to tell the seller and the other agent, hey, I got a transaction coordinator and he or she is going to handle the paperwork and who's going to pay for it, okay? Now, what goes with this offer? You have earnest money check, source of water addendum, seller's property disclosure, closing instructions, lead-based paint if it's required. That's what you're going to have. Now, you don't have your disclosure or your closing instructions at the time of offer, but you should get them later. Now, you're going to have some people that'll say, well, we're using the closing instructions from the title company. It's not my preferred way because the state has a document that needs to be used. And Doris says, if I have a document, it needs to be used and not the title companies. Now, if you have a fully executed contract, you call the title company 2 days before closing, saying we're not signing your closing instructions at the table. You have a fully executed contract that everybody has signed already, including the title company. What may not be part of this is square foot, okay? So then everybody signs, buyers, sellers. Now you fill this out when you make your offer. I don't have the earnest money. I'm a buyer's agent. I get paid from the listing agent, put all your information. This, by the way, where it says brokerage firm license, is our license number right there.
Okay.
Your name, your license number, the address of the office, the phone number. We don't have a fax anymore, so you put your email address. The person you're working with, they don't have the earnest money. You're their seller agent. They're going to be paid by the seller. It's whatever the company is. You fill that in, and then the only thing the agents have to do is sign. And then we have about a quarter of the agents that don't even do that properly. So help them out, fill this portion out, and then it makes our life easier, okay? The next thing we have is any amend extend. So if you have to change a date or something, you have an amend extend contract. If you know the buyer's seller's going to sign, everybody, you do this one. If for some reason you think that this is a contentious date that the seller is not going to sign, and if they don't sign, your buyers are going to terminate, you use the extension part first, and then you have your buyers sign. And if the buyers might terminate on whatever, let's just say it's inspection, which normally it is, then have them do this. So it's an either or. You either sign the extension or you sign for termination. Here's a copy of post-closing occupancy. It's filled out. The most important things in this contract, you may or may not want, buyers may or may not want to charge a seller for staying in there for a certain amount of days. Some people are, some people aren't. So it's up to what your buyer wants. Always match number 10 with whatever is in the original contract. Who's going to pay for the water? If the seller's staying in, the seller does. I will tell you the water will be flipped over to the buyer at the time of closing, and that probably is going to end up being a buyer charge, but it's very small. Gas and electric, that's going to be responsible for the seller. And then as you get closer to the buyer taking over, you want to go over and call the gas electric company. Hey, listen, this name is now being switched. So there's no, you don't want to cut off because it'll be a charge to put it back on for that service. This 13 is the most important piece in this contract. The seller has to have renter's insurance because on the day of sell, hang on just a second, the day of closing, the seller's property insurance is finished. So they have to have renter's insurance for the time that they're going to stay on that property. It is vital that they do that because if it burns down, the only person who's insured is the buyer and nothing of the seller is insured. So they'll pay for a whole year and then get a refund, but it's important. And you want to be sure that you do state you want some proof of that. A security deposit for whatever. Now you go down here and buyer and seller shall exchange the keys and garage door openers on blank day on or before 5 p.m. on whatever date you said that they're going to vacate the premises, okay? This is also where you can ask and request proof of the seller's renter's insurance, okay, prior to closing. Or you can write it in the original contract. Everybody signs, including the title company. No, not the title company on this one. Everybody signs, buyers, sellers. So this is title objection. If for some reason there is an objection in the title, then you want to check this due diligence and send it over to the seller saying, hey, or ILC or record, off matter records, whatever it is. Your buyers can get out on this one if they don't like something. Now, if the appraisal comes in short, then this is the document that you do. You do include a copy of the appraisal for the seller and the selling agent to understand if you can come to terms and agreement or move forth or withdraw, depending on what you're trying to accomplish here. Your title, again, is your notice. She put this in twice, no biggie. Now, if for some reason your buyer is not going to have an inspection, you want a buyer acknowledgement. No, buyer's decided against having the property inspected. Buyer has decided against purchasing a home warranty. Get them to sign this because they will come back and haunt you if this is the document that you, if you say, hey, they're not doing anything, get them to sign this document because they could come back and say, well, you told me not to get it. So if you have them sign this at the time that they don't want, and whenever that may be, you make sure they do sign this, okay? It's for your protection too. If you're writing a property that has a usage permit, I mean, if you have a property that has a septic tank and a well, the septic tank has to have a usage permit. And when we talk about dates and deadlines next week, we'll talk about how soon you need that dates and deadlines. If you're listing a property that has a septic and well on it, the septic tank, tell them to start getting the usage permit right away. It takes 2 to 6 weeks to get this from certain counties. So get this done as quickly as you can. It will save a lot of fights. Somebody just bailed on $1 million property because she didn't write it right. She doesn't understand what it was. And she thought she did, but she didn't. And she was very difficult to deal with for our agent. So usage permit is that determines they pump and make sure that the septic tank has no leaks, the leach field is doing fine, and is there anything that has to be repaired in there. Same with the well. Your buyers always want to get a well permit inspection for the flow and what can the well be used for? What's the water usage? Is it domestic only? That means you can't have any animals on the property. It's only used for household use. So be sure you investigate those things. Now our E&O insurance, if you're selling your personal property, you've got to have a seller's property disclosure, home warranty, a home inspection on the property, and you have to use the Colorado State approved forms. This is to keep your E&O intact. If you don't, it becomes a problem. You have a deductible for the E&O insurance. It is $2,500 per incident. Now, our E&O insurance went up about 48%. The good news is the prices in Colorado went up. The bad news is prices in Colorado went up. They're seeing more claims against the E&O insurance because higher the price goes, the more lawsuits are involved. So all these increases were at the low end of the increase. One of our offices went up 1,017%. So we're doing very well, but we increased your monthly payment to cover this increase that we had to absorb, that took place, which was beyond anyone's control. Again, you have to be sure you do a seller's property disclosure, put a home warranty on your property. The buyers do an inspection. If they don't, make them sign that document, and they use Colorado State approved forms. This is a well checklist. If the seller has a well, this is something that's nice to give to the buyer. It's just informational only. Nobody signs. It just helps them understand about the wells. Who's got a question on anything that I went through, which I know is a lot, and thank you for coming for more than once. Who's got any questions? Unmute yourself.
Hey, Donna, this is Scott. Can you hear me?
I can.
Going back to the lease on the solar panels, and the buyer does not want to assume the lease. Is the only other option at that point is to have the seller pay off the lease at closing?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And I will tell you, Scott, it's hard to get the people who do the leasing on the solar panels. It's hard for a buyer to get qualified within their realm. So if I write it, I'd write it that they're not going to assume it and the seller has to pay it off. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And sellers don't want to do that. But the bottom line is a lot of buyers can't get qualified because it throws their debt to ratio off.
Yeah.
Lost deal this weekend. My buyers loved a house, but then at the last minute, we found out that it did have a solar panel. The loan was 20 years. They were only a year into it. It was going to raise their payment $183 a month. So
Right.
they decided to go with another house. So yeah, I already ran into that. So I'm glad
Yeah.
you went.
Well, you could have written the offer to say that the seller has to pay it off, but I'm sure in the MLS it said seller doesn't want to pay it off.
Actually, she never even added it to the MLS. She
You're
forgot.
kidding.
No, she forgot and just went back. So we didn't even know that they were there because they were not visible from the front of the house. And so they were already at the top of the range on this house. Then to find out there was another $20,000. That's why they decided to go with a different house.
Oh, I don't blame them.
Yep. It all worked out.
Well, it works out the way it's supposed to, but let me just caution you, go to the front and the back of the house always, because in Sarah's case, she didn't see him from the front, but depending on how the house is situated, it won't be in the front. It would be on the back side or the side. It could be in the ground. It could be a number of places. So start training yourself to go to the back side of a house to look to see if there's any panels.
Okay, good. Yep.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question? Great questions, guys.
I'm assuming on all promissory notes, those are notarized, correct?
Not normally, no. It's
Okay.
rare that we use them. I bet you I've only seen 2 in the last 10 years.
Okay.
So it's very rare. And a lot of times, Sarah, the buyers or the sellers won't take them because sometimes those promissory notes are written to be redeemed at closing, which
Okay.
is, not a lot of safety for a seller on that.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, but good question. Anybody else got a question? Now, here's what I would like for you to do. I want you to go, now, Sarah, you've written them, but go and write a buy-sell contract if you haven't written one already. fill in everything, find out where you get the information, and make sure you can write it if somebody says, I want to write this offer. Okay? Now you're ready. Use your own house, use a friend's house, use your parents' house, I don't care. But get the information and know where to go. Start, make a sample. You can always go into Keller Williams, you can go into Google and you see 6 dots to the right. Click on that and you see My Drive. Click on that, and in the little box, put down Resources Park Meadows Drive and hit return. And you'll see, look for the one that says Contracts class. And then click on that. You'll see everything I went through on, there's your samples. Print them all out if you want.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Anybody else got a question? If not, I want you guys to have a great afternoon. And thank God it's raining.
Yay.
It's not raining now, but it was earlier. which was
Needed
nice.
it. My
Yes,
lawn-
and I understand tomorrow's gonna be nice, but on Wednesday, rain. I don't want to hear anybody crapping about rain because we need it so badly.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.